What is up, everybody? Nate Liss, DynastyRankings.com, Russell J. Clay with me today. If you guys knew, and you can see it at the tail end of this video, this is actually the second mock draft that we've done because we got halfway through the first one and people were complaining that the ADP wasn't fixed. Now people are saying, oh my God, people are still complaining about the ADP. Honestly, you can never make people happy. So what we're doing is a 4-round rookie mock draft, Superflex. Didn't establish it as tight end premium, although people are going to take tight ends way too early. It doesn't even matter if it was. So I'm going to randomize the draft order right now. So let's do that. Currently in the 102. Russ is currently in the 105. We're going to hit randomize the draft order. And did I end up 101 again?
Oh.
I just ended up.
I see. I'm not updated.
You are. You moved to 12.
No, what the hell?
Wow. Okay, what are the odds of that? I just literally ended up with the 101 for...
those people that do the smart math where there's that little arrow pointing up?
Yeah.
We'd have to do that to figure out what the odds are. So you're out of luck here, pal.
This is pretty crazy. Okay, so all right, so we're gonna kick this thing off. This is obviously a pre-record, so the people that are currently drafting with us are just participating in the exercise that's taking place. But Russ, we'll go through this, talk about whatever picks stand out to us, maybe talk about our picks, and just kind of go through this. And then when we're done, you and I will kind of go over the draft board in the end. Now, for those of you guys that are paying attention to the draft board you're seeing on the screen, you're probably realizing that I had mentioned that this was a 4-round draft, but there are 5 rounds showing. This is part of the reason to curb the issue of the ADP. So what we've done for the people in the draft, they can now see all positions individually, including Superflex. So it gives them the chance to find the players that they want because it was difficult to find them originally. Is that true, Russ?
Boo!
Okay, boo.
101. 101 again?
Right.
This son of a gun.
So the chat, okay. All right. So the chat is not happy. We're going to go ahead and hit start on this mock draft. Russ, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
In 2 hours when I'm on the clock.
Okay. So almost literally the same thing that I said last time, I'm going to say again. Short of the potential of a quarterback or two, maybe pushing for this position in Superflex, obviously a lot of value to the quarterback. There's maybe one guy that could knock Bijan Robinson off of the 101, but probably unlikely. Borderline generational talent at the position we believe.
No hesitation, conviction, 100% Bijan Robinson, 101. Every single time, if you don't want to take him, trade the pick for a boatload of treasure. And that's what we do with the 101 this year. Don't debate it. Don't make an article trying to get clicks. Just pick Bijan Robinson and be on your way. Right, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, look, so Anthony Richardson going at 102 is not surprising to me. And that's the guy, for me, that's the guy that I could see potentially be in that position with Bijan neck and neck. Because the reality is, I mean, a quarterback could rush. We've seen some of these quarterbacks in recent years here rush for insane amount of yardage. And that, in a sense is borderline with a guy like Bijan. You look at Lamar at his peak. You look at Hurts at his peak. But the question around Anthony Richardson is clearly the arm talent as far as accuracy and some of those questions. So this draft board is flying. Your pick is coming up. You're in a worse spot than you were before.
Yeah.
You don't have to pick Addison now, which you didn't like about 108 last time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what happens here. Now, are you surprised to see JSN go at 105? Because in our first draft, you talked about you would be willing to take him as high as 102.
You won't have to. I guess the 3 quarterbacks are pretty much guaranteed to go in the 102 to 104 spots. But I would take. I think Jaxson is worthy of being a 102 pick, kind of like. When Jahmyr Chase was going 105 in rookie drafts, kind of like that. There we go.
You went tight end.
Let's get Michael Mayer in there. First round pick, monster. and that's how we're gonna do that. And then we're gonna do a little.
I'm a little surprised by that selection. I got to be honest with
Really?
you. Yeah, I'm just the thing about tight ends, and you know this as well as I do. First off, I don't think he's a tight end prospect of the best ones that we've seen over the past couple years. I'm gonna go Zay Flowers here, by the way.
But the best ones go high.
So
in the first round.
They do, but the hit rate on them is not always that high. The production takes years. I mean, you think about guys like O.J. Howard, Noah Fant, David Njoku, like still waiting on these guys. Even Kyle Pitts, for that matter, hasn't been as great, but he's been fine. But I don't think he's the guy that people thought he was going to be quite yet. Zay Flowers, though, I don't mind that pick. He's clearly going to get first-round draft capital, it appears.
Are we sure about, the John Cena meme?
So.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am sure about that. I mean, this was a guy that I think he had 36.4% of his team's total receiving yards last year, but a yard per route run of 2.22, which isn't low. But you would think that the yards per route run might be higher. But again, that's a biased metric based on how many receivers are on the field. Guys with 2 wide receiver sets more frequently have higher yards per route run, which is why I hate yards per route run pretty much altogether.
Yeah, I just don't like the running back class or wide receiver class beyond the first couple guys. So.
But would you agree with this, though? Here's the concern. I think that I'm more concerned about the wide receiver class than I am the running back class, because we've seen the league make use and turn players into viable fantasy assets at 200 to 210 pounds. The 175-pound archetype wide receiver is still more of the outlier between the two. Like, if you had to pick the two that have been proven more frequently over the last 5 to 8 years, wouldn't it be the, sub 210-pound running back versus the sub 180-pound wide receiver?
So I guess here's my thoughts. I think Marvin Mims is better than Zay Flowers.
Sure.
So why I just can't take Zay Flowers in round 1 of a rookie draft. I mean, maybe if he goes round 1, then I'll have to change my tune, and and if he goes to a good quarterback, then I'll really have to change my tune. But as of now, it's kind of like, I don't know.
Marvin Mims is more of that true vertical threat. I mean, I really do like him, and I think he's been pushed up into the second round when we look at a lot of mocks. I mean, he had 20.1 yards per reception out of college, true deep threat, the highest yards after the catch per reception on deep targets, 13.4, top 9 yards after the catch overall. So very clearly, he's a definite downfield deep threat, but the question is, does he go to an offense that can utilize him in this manner?
Yeah. Why is Kendre Miller falling so far?
Didn't test at the combine, and I think there's some concerns that he ends up being a day 3 guy. Now, I'm a huge fan of him. By your statement there, I think you probably like him. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, you just missed out on him right there. You missed out on him by 1 pick. No, Kendre Miller is a guy that I did a video about.
Why is Dalton Kincaid also still out there? What's going on?
Because I don't think it's crazy. In general, the tight end position just takes so long to fire. And even then, there's but I mean, what do you mean
no? Why are
He's
got to go before 212? He's got to go before
double tight ends. Think about this for a second. When is the last time some of these guys fired?
All of them.
What do you mean all of them? First off, George Kittle didn't have nearly the receiving production, was a 5th-round pick. There's not been another Rob Gronkowski. There's not been another Travis Kelce. I mean, you might end up with a
Tony Gonzalez.
Right. So let's go back 25 years. I mean, it's
Mark Andrews. If Mark Andrews didn't have diabetes or whatever he has,
he's still great.
He would have gone first round,
and he's still great.
I just don't think a first-round tight end should get out of the first 2 rounds of
Cedric Tillman,
a draft. Yeah, I like that pick.
Thank you. I don't think that the tight ends. I'm not a tight end supporter really. Like, it's just a position where I feel like you can trade into some players that you feel more confident about. A lot of these, again, Noah Fant doesn't cost you very much, and it's hard. I can't tell you that Noah Fant isn't going to finally find his way at that 25, 26-year-old age, because that is when tight ends break out. I mean, it's 24, 20. Go to Kelsey, go to Kittle. All these guys, nobody broke out year 1, year 2. I mean, it takes time.
So let's say the Chargers draft Michael Mayer at 20. You're still out. Still don't think he.
Why the Chargers?
All right, I'm not going to win the mock draft today.
Why
the
Chargers?
In 4 years, when we look back on this illustrious mock draft, I think these tight ends will outlive a lot of these positional players. So
it's. The tight end is a tough position that I don't have much interest in. I feel like it's replaceable, and it's the one position where the very top is so dense with just those 3 guys. It's very concentrated. If you don't have a difference maker, then they're kind of all the same guy. Are they not?
We're drafting the difference maker now. Kelsey's 34.
But okay. No, so this is a great question. So why would the guy that you're drafting, so you're assuming that one of these guys goes to KC and ends up the future? Because this is my debate. I heard this before. I just said this on Ercolano's show. Like, I remember people being drafted to New England, and they were going to be the next Rob Gronkowski, never manifested. I remember we were waiting on the next Antonio Gates. I remember now we're waiting on the next Travis Kelce. We're waiting on the next. Those guys are so one of one. I just don't think that there's some draftable player that ends up behind them and then suddenly becomes that guy. Like that, I think that's a myth, Russ.
That is a myth. But there hasn't been a guy for Justin Herbert yet. So if there is a guy, or what if, Dalton Kincaid goes to the Jaguars in round 2? Like, I'm going to be all in on that. So I'm going to take Xavier Hutchinson here.
But even if these guys go to one of these spots, hold on, I'm on the clock here. Oh boy, this is not the juiciest spot for me. Getting into the 4th round, though. Let me think about who I want here. Oh, God. How much time do I have left? On the clock. No,
so I guess
if I wanted. Yeah.
I guess my examples for you would be like, so obviously in the first couple rounds, this isn't real, but a guy like Austin Hooper, drafted pretty early, drafted to a good quarterback at the time, developed into a pretty darn good fantasy tight end by year 3, 4. I know we're not playing fantasy for 3, 4 years out, but is he going with Mo Ibrahim?
Yeah, I'm going.
That's a great pick.
So I'm going Ibrahim. I'm going. We're making it happen. I mean, he's not the biggest guy, 5'8", 203, but ranked 3rd in the class with 46 carries of over 10 yards or greater. 4.3% target share, though, so fairly non-existent. 25 targets in 5 years. That's a bit concerning for a guy that's 203 pounds, but when you watch him run, there's some excitement there, and again, breaks off big runs, so take a shot. But I think the problem, too, with these guys that are so small, Russ, if they don't catch passes, and that's why I kind of regret this. I was on the clock there a little bit. If they don't catch passes, like, what's their route to success in the NFL? Because it's hard to find a banger or like some slashing 203-pound running back that doesn't have a previous target share of, 8%, 9%, because that's only getting you into the 65th, 70th percentile of receiving backs. It's just concerning at 4.3%. I don't know. But I picked him, so.
Yeah. Well, I have so what about Pat Freiermuth, Nate? He was a 2nd-round rookie pick. How do you feel about that pick 2 years later?
Okay, that's one of the rare cases where I do like him. But again, wouldn't that make him an outlier? Again, historically, if we stretch out the timeline and we put graphs.
How about Dallas Goedert?
Dallas Goedert, that's the one example I'll bring up in recent times of a guy that came in behind a known tight end and actually replaced him. Because you had Zach Ertz, who was a dominant tight end for a long time. Then Goddard came in, and there was claims that he's going to be the guy to take over for Ertz. And that's one of the only cases in existence that I can make where a tight end came in and did what we expected based on the prior tight end. Because I will bring up, remember Ladarius Green? I know you do.
Oh yeah, but he didn't have that draft capital. But yes,
Even
I
with the
agree.
draft capital, I mean, go through some of those names.
Sure, there's been a lot of busts. There's been a
Dude,
lot of busts, no
but
doubt about
what
it.
do you consider draft capital, by the way? Third round or higher?
Third round or higher.
Okay,
Yep.
so I mean that brings up Irv Smith, Hayden Hurst, even Gesicki's had some time here. He's athletic. Again, Njoku.
So I guess the argument for you would be a guy like TJ Hawkinson has had moments, but probably wasn't worth a first round rookie pick. Especially in tight end premium, he really got boosted up. So, if you're kind of looking at it that way, I guess just like I kind of go with the profile. This is a really, really good tight end class, and we had a really, really shitty one last year. I don't know if we're gonna get kicked off YouTube for me saying that.
You're fine,
but
you'll be. It's all right.
We're not gonna get. I mean, we got Brock Bowers next year, but we're really not gonna have a many good tight ends coming up in the next couple years. So
my question to you, when you look at tight ends. Because here's the thing, when we look at what correlates the strongest via data research to fantasy points per game in the future, at the tight end position, it does oftentimes come down to production. It's market share of receiving yards and total receiving yards tend to be the two highest indicators. Then, oddly enough, broad jump is one of the other ones that's been a positive indicator of future success.
Is that true for tight end?
That is true for tight end. The problem with it is, though, Russ, when I look at these guys,
Bryce Ford Wheaton.
Is that? I mean, I realize he's a super freak athlete, but this is one of those dart throws, right? I mean, this is the last. You've got the last pick of the draft for us.
I mean, yeah, round 4 of a rookie draft, you're really looking for a guy to make a roster at that point.
Yeah. So I'm telling everybody only.
So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna fill out. You're gonna be disgusted with this pick.
I don't want to be disgusted. Just don't take
You
another
are.
tight end. You've ruined this for me. Oh, Zach.
No.
Kuntz, there he goes. There you go. Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, now that's a guy. Now, if we're talking about players, like this is the thing. When we look at all the tight ends that have really fired of late, they've been the guys that have superior athleticism, right? I mean, that's the one thing that we hang our hat on. It's the reason that we like the guys like Foster Moreau. It's the reason that we've liked a bunch of these tight ends like Kittle along the way. It's the reason that a guy like Zach Kuntz is rated as highly as he is. He's the most athletic tight end in the whole class. Now, Russ, I'm going to tell you right now, if I was going to make a pick on these tight ends, why wouldn't it have been Kuntz, the most athletic tight end, a guy that at one point in his career had 73 receptions for 692 yards? Oh, that's an interesting one. For what, 692 yards, probably the most receptions of any tight end amongst this whole group. And it really doesn't, I'm not sure it matters where they come from. I think pedigree does, but it doesn't matter because we've seen these guys. Again, what's the explanation for a guy like Kittle?
Iowa blocking offense, trash offense. Sorry, Iowa fans.
22 receptions was his best season, 314 receiving yards, 5th round pick, insanely athletic, ends up proving to be like one of the best tight ends in, all of NFL football at one point. End the draft. Yes. End the draft right there.
So, I mean, again, in a perfect world, if we're not picking at 112. So no, I don't like the value on Michael Mayer. I just don't want to pick until we get to the draft. I just think this is a really weak class, I guess you could say. Like that's kind of how I base my rookie drafting on. Like we have Bijan. The top 5 is good. After that, I think this is a pretty terrible class. So
I mean, I guess when you think about what it takes for a tight end to break out, and again, if we're doing Superflex, then tight end premium, then to me, tight end makes a ton more sense here. But like when you think about the way that some of these guys are manifesting right now, like rather than take one of these guys in just a standard Superflex, like going after a Dawson Knox, even looking at a Cole Kmet, these guys that are finally starting to kind of turn the corner a bit, like those are probably guys I want to invest in.
It was free though. Knox was free. He was a 4th round.
Okay. And that's,
pick.
again, another great example, but Dawson Knox was another really good athlete, So it's like That's ultimately for me, and that's why I think in this draft, I think Kuntz is probably the best value of all of them in this particular draft that we just did, because he goes borderline the last pick of the draft, most athletic tight end, right? So is there anything in here that stands out to you? Because I noticed that when we look at the second round here, and we look at some of these players, Devon Achane goes at 3. Really undersized guy, 188 pounds. Sean Tucker's small. Tyjae Spears small. Abanikanda is bigger than the rest of those guys. Then Kendre Miller. To me, Kendre Miller going at 211, because we're pre-draft right now.
That's crazy to me.
That's a bit crazy, because I think if he was to get day 2 capital, even if he was middle of the 3rd round, I think he approaches, because like you see Zach Evans up here at 111, like, those guys flip-flop positions, essentially. Like, I don't think that Zach Evans at 202 pounds, with questions about, he didn't get the workload when they were playing together at TCU, changes schools, gets buried by a freshman running back. I mean, he's never been the lead guy anywhere, and he's not targeted in the passing game.
Yeah, the Zach Evans one is interesting. Same with Tank Bigsby. Like, these were supposed to be the guys at the top of these rookie drafts, and the profiles just didn't bear that out. Now, I will say, if you're doing production profile research, we've seen a lot of things shift production profiles over the last couple of years. The transfer portal becoming a much bigger thing. We're seeing guys transfer both out and other guys getting transferred in for competition for depth charts. It makes things really messy. We had that COVID season and all these guys' freshman seasons. So this is a complicated class, and I guess from an evaluation standpoint, we have to keep that in mind. So while I'm saying this class is terrible, it's also because a lot of the things I look at historically could be off due to some weird circumstances. So we really need the NFL draft this year to kind of parse through some of this craziness.
Can you still see the draft board here?
Yes.
See how we change views? I'm trying to shift it up for people. Listen, and guys, there's going to be the original mock draft going before this at the end if you want to see it. Yeah, I think overall my whole philosophy on what we're looking at right now with this class is, number one, a majority of the running backs are undersized. And previously, this was not players that you wanted to invest in. But the way that the NFL is representing more of split backfields and utilizing undersized guys in different ways of deployment, it really matters that they've got proven target share. It's the reason why the Ibrahim thing, I'm not super happy about that selection on my part. Just because data also shows that if you weren't a pass catcher in college, you're probably not going to be a pass catcher in the pros. Like, I mean, honestly, like, okay, Leonard Fournette had a massive jump, but I mean, how many guys? It depends. Who historically we got A.J. Dillon recently has a little bit of a nudge because he had a season with, 0 catches and 300 carries?
I would just look at those Wisconsin backs from the past decade, the James Whites, the Melvin Gordons, who were in that Wisconsin system and then ended up being receiving backs. So I'm not saying you're wrong, and I think statistically you're correct.
Yeah.
But also, I would throw out there, guys in these weird systems. So when you look at the Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift, college backfield, it did bear out that their NFL careers worked out that way, but it also, I don't think Nick Chubb's not talented enough to catch passes. I just think he's best at, plowing through defensive linemen every play. And same thing with Swift. They're utilizing him as a pass catcher, probably not because he can't run between the tackles. It's because of health. So those profiles bear out for the most part with how they play in college, but just be aware of the context there.
I think the Melvin Gordon, Nick Chubb one, I mean, and again, I know you're not going to want to hear this statement, but I think that makes Melvin Gordon more of an outlier than sort of a marker of expectation going forward, because at least with Melvin Gordon, though, and I'm not even sure I would call him an outlier because he had a 7.5% target share, I believe, coming out of college or somewhere within that range. Even Nick Chubb, I don't think he was so far off, but I think Chubb was and there's different data sites here, but I think even Chubb had a relatively useful level of target share, but I don't think it was enough. And then, so 4.1%, it was 20th percentile. So it was existent, but not really existent, which makes sense. But Melvin, on the other side, using playerprofiler.com here to pull some of the stuff up. Look at Melvin Gordon, 8.7%, 70th percentile. So it's not like it wasn't in his history. And that's kind of my consideration with these guys. Peter Howard just did a pretty good deep dive on this as well. It's the reason that when I look at this class, I see undersized running backs and I see receivers that are mostly 170-ish pounds. Like, wasn't that historically not the guys that we wanted to invest in? Am I wrong about this?
You are correct. Sort of. I mean, unless the profile bears out, we wanted to invest in Deshaun Jackson.
Sure.
And even a guy like Marquise Brown kind of had the profile to match a guy that went in the first round and had good speed. And it's a different NFL now. I've fully come to grips with that. It's a totally different game. I mean, if you guys have watched a basketball game in the last 2 to 3 years, it is totally different than the game we grew up watching. And I think that's what's happening with the NFL as well. This is not mid 2000s football. This isn't even 2015 football anymore. These guys can be 160. The only reason some of these guys were 180, 190 previously was because they know that's what the NFL wanted and they would bulk up from the combine. So I think a lot of those combine numbers from the last couple decades were funny money anyway. And now they're just not hiding it because they know teams don't care anymore. So I think that's really what we're seeing. I think Jaxson Smith-Njibga would have been 210, 215 20 years ago, but he's just like, I don't have to bulk up now. I can just be my normal weight and they're not going to care. Who are the last couple guys rolling through? Like Justin Jefferson, I think he would have weighed in heavier. Who are some of these other top prospects to come in? I just look at all these profiles and I'm like CeeDee Lamb, he definitely 20 years ago would have bulked up 5-10 pounds before the combine and just said, yeah.
Does it matter more is what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't think they care anymore. Like Tutu Atwell was 115 pounds and he got drafted in the second round. No,
right.
Jokes aside, Tutu, what was his weight at the combine? Like 160 pounds?
Yeah, 168 or something like that.
Yeah, that was it for me. That was the signal. All right, it doesn't matter anymore.
But I think at the other side of that, and I agree, like I think teams are just going for players that they think can fit in a role sometimes, but I can guarantee you after the Rams took that massive L on this selection, they are not going to do that again. But you had brought up, and I don't know if it's on this stream or the first one that got messed up, but you had brought up a guy like Marvin Mims, and I think that's a great example. Now, the guys that are in the 180-pound archetype, which he is, which in this case, Zay Flowers, a player that I took, are, to me, it's really funny because those were still guys in the past that I was not a fan of, but in juxtaposition to the rest of this class full of 173-pound, 175-pound guys, a receiver that's 183, 185 pounds looks like a god to me right now because I'm like, there's nobody else. I mean, there's Quentin Johnston, who's obviously big. I mean, Jaxson Smith, obviously he's pushing the 200-pound threshold, but who's in here? They're all little, and there's so many slot guys. Every one of these guys.
Do you remember mid 2010s where the debate was sub 200 pounds?
Yes,
was like a death knell.
Yeah.
So like the last two classes alone, 4 first round, wide receivers, Olave, Wilson, Waddle, and Smith. Wilson was 192. These guys, I guarantee, would have added water weight before the combine 10 years ago. Like Jalen Waddle weighing in at 182. I just don't believe that would have happened 2 decades ago. And I just think he runs a 4.2. Teams don't care anymore about weight. That's my belief. And that's kind of what we've been seeing bear out. And all these big schools, with these 5-star recruits, they're not as big as they used to be. And I think that's just purely, they don't necessarily see an edge in prospect, future evaluation anymore. I don't think these guys have gotten smaller. That's not how professional sports work. But for some reason, all the best prospects over the last 5 years have been like CeeDee Lamb. People didn't like him because he was smaller. And it's like, is he smaller or is he just not bullshitting the weight anymore?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my thing, coming from sort of a world where weight cutting and weight management are heavy factors. Like I talk to people all the time about the idea that like you have a natural walking around weight, right? And in season, your weight is going to decline. You're going to try to maintain it, but you have this strict regimen. So when these guys hit the combine, they're like cattle at a fair, and they're just like stepping up because they want to show like what they have to offer. Yeah. And so they bulk up. And I've said it before, like Travis Etienne a few years ago when he got on the scale, we were like, dude, bullshit. That's water weight. This guy's heavier and bigger than we know he's not going to play at that weight. And the thing is, you weigh in one time, you run 2 times, and it's like, it's locked for fucking history for all of time. Right?
Like, okay, be honest. How much do we really think Deshaun Jackson's playing weight was?
Oh, man, 172?
It was not 175, man. No, it was not. That's what he weighed in at the combine. 5'10".
Yeah.
I mean, he had to be in the 160s during his career.
Lowest 170s. And here's another thing for you. Like, you think about these guys. I don't think it was Brandon Cooks most recently. There was a wide receiver. Maybe you can help me remember. He bulked up. And I know Zay Flowers has him recently. And he bulked up and they're like, look, he put on 10 pounds of muscle. And it's like a picture of him before and after. That doesn't mean shit. That's the same thing as people doing the fucking eye test and going, oh, he's going to be fast or he's going to be slow. It's like you're convincing yourself just because they took a fucking photo of a guy and claims he went up 10 pounds. Dude, you can look, your body composition can look different on any day. That's just total eye test bullshit. And so I'm like, you guys are getting like totally caught hook, line, and sinker on this stuff, because when we hear about guys gaining weight or running backs losing weight, it's never entering the league. It's always year 2, year 3 to sustain injuries, to whatever. It's never, oh, this guy came in underweight and now he's gaining, right? You know what I mean?
Great example of that was LaShawn McCoy later in his career. He did gain weight. He bulked up, became more of a between the tackles runner later in his career. So Nate, you mentioned the weight cutting thing, and this is probably why I have this take. Because I love MMA now, and I watch these weight cuts in the opposite direction. These 155-pound weight divisions, these guys are 190 on fight night or 180, and then you see some of these 185-pound guys, they're manipulating the weight perfectly optimized to get down. And I don't think these guys do this once they're in the NFL. I think they get nutritionists.
Yep.
They say they get a trainer, they get an agent who says, hey, this is what you need. This is what the NFL teams are telling us. You need to be up here by the combine. And if you do that and then run this time, and hey, once you step on that scale, you can cut that weight off. Like Bryce Young, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's total malarkey. And, for the most part, again, I still want to trust the numbers, and I still do believe over time probability is going to work out where all these numbers are correct. So a lot of this rant is, I'm not telling you to not trust the numbers anymore. I'm just saying, if you really want the meat and potatoes behind what is going on here, a lot of these weights are malarkey.
Well, what's really funny to me, guys will take an absolute shit on a player that's 206 pounds. And then there'll be a guy that's 212 and they're like, oh man, that's a good weight for him. And it's like, guys, do you understand? I'll step on a scale on Monday. I'll eat a ton of food this weekend. I'll step on a scale fucking Monday and I will cut 7 pounds by Friday. Easy. Like I can go up. It's not a thing. So we get so hung up on the weight and we ignore performance. Like for some reason, like Zach Evans is a great example. If you believe he's good and he went from whatever he claimed, 212, 215 to 202, I know you're hung up on the 202 thing, but I can assure you he was probably playing around 202 anyways, if that's what he weighed in at. It's not, you don't go from 215 and drop back that far. And I know there's claims of speed, but again, this is such like hyperbole because I've talked to a bunch of strength and conditioning coaches across the country, like privately through via DM. I've got access to a couple because just back in the day, they're really, really nice. And we've talked about a couple cases where they had guys that came to school. True story. So one of the top strength and conditioning coaches in the country had a prospect once upon a time, came to his school, showed up at 163 pounds as a freshman, left at 202 pounds in his final season, showed up, ran a 4.4, left, ran a 4.4. So these guys that think that Zach Evans had to cut 9 pounds to run faster don't realize that there are guys gaining 30 pounds and still maintaining the functional speed and athleticism. And I know it seems counterintuitive, but like, the way that you train, again, and these guys that don't know how to run out of the blocks, the guys that don't,
Okay, and so this Zach Kuntz was a Penn State tight end. Did you know that? And he transferred. And so it's like it's no coincidence. Saquon, Kuntz, Gesicki, like all these guys. Like you can find strength and conditioning coaches that for some reason all these top athletes are coming out of these same colleges, right? Yeah. I do believe there's something to that as well. Like Chris Godwin was a Penn State guy. That guy's a great athlete as well. And there's another tight end that came out of Penn State. And I just, you can optimize so many things like that. There's so many great trainers, the type of nutrition you have now and like all this crazy stuff. So I just want to throw that out there that that's kind of one of the takes I'm cooking up in the hopper now about how weights are changing. Cause the NBA is the best example. That game is completely different now. And I think we're shifting that way in the NFL.
Yeah. It's certainly changed. And this is my take on it. The NFL is going to validate how fearful it is of these types of wide receivers more specifically this year because you have so many guys that are in that 170 to 177 threshold in this particular class. The NFL is going to validate for us how much concern there really is because you've got a couple guys that are over 180. You've got a boatload of guys that are under it. And I'm really interested to see what does the NFL do because, again, you have a very high rate of slot receivers amongst this group as well. And I do think that slot is very viable position these days at the NFL level. I mean, it's made tons of guys have thrived from here, by the way. And I don't think it's a death knell. You look at a guy like Justin Jefferson. We've talked about this in the past. Like this guy comes out of college running exclusively out of the slot, goes to the NFL and kills on the outside. But the advantage to guys like that, A.J. Brown, is that when there's a bad matchup on the outside, they can kick them into the slot and continue to make them viable in and out of games. I know we saw this with Jefferson versus Darius Slay. They kicked him into the slot, and he was being targeted there more frequently. Get him away from the problems on the outside and let him flourish and change your game plan to survive a game. Yeah. So I look at it as more of like an all-terrain ability, and so it's not a knock. Guys like Amon-Ra are killing it.
So I guess, one other thing is like when you look at a guy, who are the guys that are emerging this generation, especially like the later round guys, you look at a guy like Tony Pollard, and this started to happen in the 2000s, but it's happening more and more. You mentioned running backs kind of shifting into split roles. What is in 2023 season, this upcoming season, what is the difference between a slot receiver and a sort of third down receiving back? I would argue there is very little. Like Austin Eckler kind of is showing us, what is the real difference now. Austin Eckler can run every slot route. Same with Tony Pollard. Now, Pollard was kind of used more as a traditional running back when he was in there, his explosiveness on outside runs and stuff like that. But I just look at a guy like James Cook, who's getting banged hard now because they signed Damian Harris. And I'm like, hold on. Can he get 200 touches with, 50 of them being receptions, and then we're fine? So I just, it's a more willing to optimize skill set NFL in 2023. We did not have that a decade ago. The coordinators were not there yet.
This is where I'm so high on a guy like Zach Charbonnet, because if he gets second round capital, right now, just looking at consensus mock drafts, He is projected pick number 54 to the Chargers. That is where he's currently being slated. And this is one of those guys that has the production profile, 13.7% college target share, had over 40% of his team's total rush attempts, has the feature size, has the athleticism requisite. Like, amongst the class that looks like this, these to me are sort of the gems. And I think the concern, and we haven't talked about this on the show yet, is that the running back position, its shelf life oftentimes is the rookie contract in Dynasty. Like, guys perform at age 26, at age 27. Obviously, you're very well aware of the age apex. Age 29 is an absolute fucking cliff. But at age 25 and a half, age 26, we begin to see a true decline. And then you bring in competition. We watched Zeke Elliott get work taken from him over the last few years. Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, guys that don't catch passes, they're the rare unicorns in the NFL. They're the rare guys that age and perform. But if you don't catch passes, Russ, what is your true in Dynasty? So a guy, you brought up Damian Harris, or bring up Devin Singletary or Miles Sanders. Like, I got to be honest with you, Russ, those guys aren't safe. They're still not safe.
So hear me out, because
Yes.
I had this take starting 2 years ago when everyone was saying sell Derrick Henry, sell Christian McCaffrey. These guys are all old and toast. Sell Saquon. He's going to be 25. The truly special prospects, which all three of those were, Derrick Henry went in the second round for God knows what reason. I guess accurate running back value. But, in terms of prospects, he was 100% worthy of being a first-round prospect. Some of these guys are going to last. Now, we went through a full decade where none of them lasted, and my boy Todd Gurley is one of the reasons why people are fed up, and that's fair, and I respect that. But I would not be surprised if McCaffrey lasts till 30, 31, 32,
I'm on board with the pass catcher take, though. Like,
so you're right, like 80 to 90% of these guys are done. We just haven't gotten any Frank Gore, Matt Fortes in a while, and I feel like we are going to start to see some of these guys. So if you're a contender in Dynasty and you're like, oh, Derrick Henry, like, I don't know if I want to sell him yet, or do I want to sell him? I don't know that you're going to get the value from getting, the Adrian Peterson later career of getting those low end RB1 numbers for a couple more years. So I don't know. I agree. And you're right. I just caution, like, don't sell those vets for pennies now, because you might get, some league winning years yet.
No, and I agree. So, like, my take is a guy like Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's been phenomenal for the duration of his career. It started with injuries, some significant ones, but the decline is very evident at this point. Like, he's still been good, but the decline is taking place. He's 27 and a half years old. My concern with a guy like him is when we think about Dynasty. Now, it's possible. It's absolutely possible that Dalvin Cook could have a top 12 season, depending on where he ends up or what he does or how this plays out this year. It's very possible. It's also possible that he could have a very subpar season, not looking like himself, and suddenly be a guy that's valued as a late second-round pick next year. And to your point, if you're a contender, I don't mind having some of these guys if I can throw a third and some tangible wide receiver that I'm not that confident in, that's give somebody else hope to believe in, package them and go for a guy like Dalvin Cook to a team that wants picks and younger guys. But some of these guys, like Joe Mixon, 26 and a half, that's still plenty young enough to perform. But we're seeing just declines and injuries all over the board. And in Dynasty, you lose value so quick. So that's my concern. I think a lot of these younger backs, smaller backs, could go into these backfields and do some damage in terms of minor opportunity. Like James Cook, what's going to happen with James Cook? That'd be a question, right? He goes to a backfield. They add some competition to that same backfield. Is he a guy that's going to end up the pass catcher in the role, because the Bills do target the running back position heavily? I mean, these are just examples, but the way that the NFL is moving right now, guys can get replaced so quickly or gain competition so quickly. And I want to believe the whole adage, follow the money, but then what the fuck happened to Chase Edmonds, right? Like, what happened to, I don't always follow the money. It's not happening.
Alvin Kamara is our archetype for the new version of a featured back, right? A majority pass catcher who gets some rushing attempts. I mean, that's really what we want.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't have a lot of Kamara when he came into the NFL, but if we're going to evaluate an optimized skill set for fantasy football, Alvin Kamara was 215 and probably a real 215. He's pretty bulky for a receiver. But these are the types of guys that's going to be the new featured back. No, he's never had a season with over 300 touches. However, he's had some huge league winning years. Totally, that's what we're looking for now.
Totally irrelevant for him too, because he's the literal perfect combination of guy who can break tackles and get yards after contact and guy that can eat up yards through the air. And he can do it in sophisticated ways. He's not just a guy getting dump offs. He's a guy that can split out wide. He's a guy that can run some routes. I mean, he's just so versatile, good pass pro. I mean, he is ultimately the perfect back. Every team in the NFL is looking for that guy. I mean, that's probably why Tampa Bay did what they did with a guy like Rachaad White, because they think they have that guy, right? I don't know that they do have that guy, but that's surely what they think they have. And it's sort of, the verdict's out on that. But anyways, Russ, I'm sure we could talk about subject matter like this all day. We've deviated so far. All right, so looking at the draft board,
I know.
Circling back to the draft board, is there anything here that stood out to you whatsoever at the end? Anything you would have put a bow on?
Miller most notably. And then Darnell Washington, that's a pretty fair value. Tank Bigsby, curious what happens with him. I really liked what he produced. And then Ibrahim, that guy was a beast at Minnesota. Now, they had a great system for running backs at Minnesota, but he was very impressive. If he could have stayed healthy, he would have had, I think he had a big final season, but he was injured for most of it. So even when 12 games, 1,700 yards, and he was hurt for most of it. So
monster breakaway runner. Monster.
Yeah. So I really am curious what happens with him.
Well, I mean, you look at a guy like last year with Pacheco. I mean, Pacheco's bigger, but physical runner, explosive runner. Those are the kind of guys. And in a situation like Kansas City, there was a wide open situation for a lead runner. Maybe not a passing down back, but a lead runner. So if a guy like this, Ibrahim goes to one of these types of rosters, I can see the allure of it. But draft capital being important, again, Pacheco, great example of why it doesn't always matter. Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, right? These guys do find a way. But the depth chart does need to be reasonably thin. Khalil Herbert, right, in the beginning. And they can pop when given opportunities. So anyways, Russ, this was a fly-by-night draft here. Did it real quick. I don't think anything here is too crazy. Yeah, it was quick. Hendon Hooker, about where I would have expected him. So anyways, Russ, thanks for coming on, man. Promote the channel, if you would. What's your channel? Where can people find you? Where can they find your work?
Russell Clay. We're directly tied to Rashad Penny's performance, and if I can make highlights of him with classical music. So we got a big season on our hands if they don't draft Bijan in Philly.
Love it, man. Love it. So I will put Russ's information. I'll link his YouTube. I'll link his Twitter down below in the description. So for anybody that comes by, checks us out, give Russ a follow. Go check out his YouTube channel as well. And I'm trying to hit up Russ and see if he'll make more content with me in the future. So if you like the video, comment below. Say some sweet things to Russ to convince him to continue to make more content with me. I want to make content on his channel. I want to have him make content on this channel. Try to make this as much of a regular thing as I can. Difficult, because Russ has so many things going on in his life, but I'm going to continue to prod and pull him as much as possible. So anyways, everybody, thank you for checking this out. We will do a live one probably in the future. This was a pre-record, but a lot of fun, especially pre-draft, because this whole board could look vastly different after the NFL draft. So anyways, guys, we'll have some new content for you next week.